Hey folks, I am Becky with Enduring Finances. Welcome to my channel. Today we're taking a look at my first month of hosting my house, my rental house through Airbnb and Furnish Finder because it came into play, and kind of a breakdown of what that kind of was as an experience for me, and then the financial side of it at the very end. There are chapters, so if you just want to skip to the very end, I'm not going to hold that against you at all. But if you would like to learn more about my experience, feel free to watch this entire video. I guess I'll just start by saying last fall I moved in with my now fiance and moved out of my old house, and we spent quite a few months renovating it and refurbishing it and turning it into a up-and-coming rental house in the area. I've done a couple of videos breaking down the different steps I did on that. Feel free to check those out. But all in all, we finally got it finished at the very end of November, and I got it listed up on Furnish Finder so that it went live essentially December 1st. And I waited a couple weeks because my goal is to focus more on midterm rentals than it is on a short-term rental through Airbnb. But I wasn't getting any bites. I wasn't having anybody say, yeah, I want to rent from you. And so I decided to list the house up on Airbnb as well, a little bit ahead of what I anticipated. And almost essentially the minute that I listed it, I felt like I was getting requests. I booked my first rental, my first guest within the first hour, I believe. And then it was just bam, bam, bam. After I booked that first guest for the very end of December, I had a guest reach out to me. They wanted to stay starting that Friday. So it was, I think I listed it like on Wednesday. But I listed in the middle of the week. I had a guest that wanted to stay that Friday, but they could not afford to pay until that day. They were moving from a different state, then been hopping from rental to rental in the area, and we needed to wait till they got paid to put the payment down for 2 weeks at my house. My initial thought at first was, heck no, you can't pay till the day of. Like, I could potentially lose out on 2 weeks of income just holding this for you. But when we were talking a little bit more, I reviewed them as a guest on Airbnb and kind of got the idea that this was somebody that I felt was going to be good to their word, and they were going to pay me, and they were going to be good guests. And so I trusted my gut, and I promised that I would hold the listing for them for 2 weeks. And I'm brand new to Airbnb. I don't know what's going on with that. I don't know how to do anything hardly. But I held it for 2 weeks. I got payment notification Friday morning, sent them the information, and they moved in Friday and stayed for 2 whole weeks. Throughout their entire 2 week stay, I booked up pretty much the entire rest of December into the beginning of January with bookings of guests coming in, most of them for typically one night. And then on December 31st, I had my first tenant on Furnish Finder, which is a mid to long-term furnished rental site specifically for people that are moving for work. Traveling workers is typically what they're known for. But they reached out to me on December 31st and wanted to move in on the 4th of January. And I was just blown away. They wanted to stay for 2 to 3 months. And I was very, very happy with that. I sent background check, all the necessary paperwork on that. They signed a rental agreement that they were moving in the afternoon of the 4th of January, and I was really happy with it. So fast forward, we go through all these bookings in December into the beginning of January. I clean the rental, I get it set up, I send all the information to this long-term tenant. And then on the 8th of January, so 4 days after they are already supposed to be living in the rental, they sent me a message saying that they're not there, they haven't moved in yet, they've had something come up and they needed to change their plans, and essentially they weren't going to be using their rental anymore. And because we already had a legally binding lease agreement, a contract in place, I kind of went back and forth on what to do in the situation, because I felt just based off of how Airbnb was going, I could rent it out and I could still make income from them, but I didn't feel comfortable doing that while also charging this tenant. And legally, you can't really do that. And so we came to an arrangement where if I could book the rental for even partial days during their first month there, I would refund them that amount based off of a set rate per day. So that way they didn't have to pay for a rental that they weren't staying in, and I didn't feel bad at all for getting somebody else in there and earning income off of it. and kind of like gives you backseats, because I didn't have to do that at all. So then the next day, on the 9th of January, I listed the rental house up, and boom, Airbnb hit that same night. Somebody wanted to stay the night, travel out with 2 newborn babies. Mind-blowing, 2 brand new newborn twins. So I booked them up. So the next day, after going through all this stuff with that tenant from Furnish Finder, they reached out and said, just kidding, I'm actually going to move in. When can I do that? And I was like, well, shucks. So went the next day, 10th of January, cleaned after the guests from Airbnb checked out, flipped the rental over, let that tenant from Furnish Finder know they could move in, and then they moved in that afternoon, and they have been staying there all the way through the end of January, and they're expected to stay potentially through the end of March, and I'm very, very happy about that. Even with all that huffy fluffy stuff with tenant going back and forth, the first 30 days on Airbnb, I have been essentially completely booked, except for one night where I could not make the turnaround to get out to Boise to clean the rental, flip the rental, and then get back out with their schedule. So there was one night in December where I declined a booking because it just wasn't in the books. It was not going to happen with our time frame. And then Furnish Finder tenant came in and is covering all those days, minus the one where the Airbnb guest stayed, and then came back in and finished their stay, which threw me for a loop. But pretty good there. So for December, Airbnb was booked for 18 nights. The first booking started on the 13th of December. They stayed for 2 weeks. Airbnb, you pay up front for those stays, so I got 2 weeks paid at the very beginning. In January, I had Airbnb booked for 4 nights. One of those was carried over from December for a 2-night stay, but all the other ones have been single night stays, just people traveling through. That means in the first 30 days of Airbnb, 22 of those nights were booked through Airbnb, plus some of those were booked through Furnish Finder. More than half of the first month was booked up through Airbnb. Weekends, weekdays, didn't matter. 2-week-long stay, which was phenomenal. Just the amount of money that came from that. But that's just kind of like a generic overview of my initial experience with it, because it was a whirlwind. You jump in, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know how to do anything, and you just kind of figure it out. Now, let's kind of look at it from a more logical perspective. I think one of the biggest questions that people ask when they're comparing if they're going to potentially do an Airbnb themselves to someone that's running an Airbnb is, what type of house are you renting? Well, I have a 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom house in Boise, Idaho. I have a queen-size pull-out bed in the front couch, the couch in the front room, so I can sleep 6 people. The house itself is pretty small. It's just over 1,000 square feet. I think it's 1,008 feet, 1,008 square feet. But the backyard is absolutely ginormous. The whole house itself is on a 1/4 acre, which is really, really rare in Boise. And because of this, my house is a really good setup for people with families and people with pets, because I have a doggy door already set up. I have a fully fenced, huge backyard. I have 2 bedrooms with an extra couch if you need it. And so that's kind of where my target focus is. And not, people that are looking for the fanciest house and all the bells and whistles, looking for people with pets that want their pets to have a place to stay, and and people with kids who want their kids to have a spot to be able to play inside the house and in the backyard. And so that's really where my focus is as far as who I'm trying to get into my house. One of the biggest obstacles you have to overcome when you're going into renting out an Airbnb is trying to decide what you're going to price your property at, your house, your bedroom, whatever it is. There are services out there that you can pay, $200, maybe a little less, a little more, for them to essentially evaluate the market and give you an estimated price that you should go for, and then variable what could be on big weekends and holidays. And there's services out there that will literally update your price for you based off of what's going on in the market and all of that. Those cost money. And me starting this, I have 0 extra money. So I did the self-made approach. I went on Airbnb and VRBO and Furnish Finder, and I looked at it as if I was a guest looking to stay at a property in my area. I looked at Boise, Idaho. I looked at 2-bedroom, 1-bath houses, pet friendly, and I looked at what they were pricing for a variety of different days throughout the year. I looked at 2 weeks, I looked at a month, I looked at 1 night, 2 nights, all those things, and I compared them, and I pulled all that information manually into a spreadsheet on Excel, and then I went, okay, this is what I'm seeing, this is what the house kind of looks like, this is where I might be sitting as far as target price for the area for having a rental. That being said, I knew what my target market was: families, people with pets, so I wanted to focus on pet-friendly, backyard, small house. So after I did that, I decided that I was going to set the average rental price of $91 a night for my house. That being said, Airbnb was then like, hey, you're new at this. You should offer 20% off to your first 3 guests who book through you. So $91 at a 20% off rate to get people in the door and to get you good reviews, because Airbnb is based so heavily on reviews, and that's what you're looking for with the guest. You want somebody that offers what they're essentially is giving you what they're offering. Their house is showing up, it's good, you know what to expect, and they have really positive reviews from guests staying there that make you want to stay there too. So I was like, you know what, it's a good idea. Let's get some 5-star reviews, lower the price a little bit, get people in the door. So that is how I booked my first 3 stays through Airbnb. As I said earlier, my first booking was for the 30th of December, and towards the end of the month, it was set for the original price of $91 a night, with 20% off makes it $72.80 off, $72.80 for 1 night. My second booking was for the 2 weeks, which was at 20% off. I know, that one was like, but I got a good review out of it. It was 14 nights, would have been $91 a night with 20% off, $1,019.20 for the 2-week stay instead of about $1,275. So lost, about $260 with that 20% off, but I got a 5-star review. For my third booking, I kind of dived a little differently, and I decided that I wanted to offer a non-refundable option within Airbnb. And I did this because some people are going to book something and then decide they actually don't want to stay there, and there's different policies within Airbnb as far as 28 days, 30 days, 24 hours, 48 hours notice. And I decided that I wanted to offer the option that if somebody knew that they were going to be staying, they could get 10% off by booking a non-refundable option, even if it's 6 months in advance. That is booked non-refundable. They're not getting their money back for anything. And so I added that in to kind of entice people like me who book out really far in advance. And the third booking I got pulled that up. So they have 20% off for being my third guest, 10% off for doing non-refundable, which made it drop from $91 for the 1 night to $65.52, which was a little lower than what I was anticipating. But after I finished those first 3 bookings, the price went up to $91 again. And I knew this was a little bit higher than what I kind of wanted in the area. And so I adjusted it back down to $81 a night, so $10 less a night. And I booked another guest. And then I went, man, $81 with service fees and all the things going out of it really isn't enough to cover all of this, plus the amount of money that I have to spend in gas to get out there to clean the rental or to have a person clean the rental for me. And so I added in a $25 cleaning fee, which is about $5 or $6 more than the gas it costs me to drive out to Mountain Home, out to Boise, because I live at Mountain Home, which is 45 miles away, one way, to clean the rental. So I adjusted it down to $81 a night, and then I've adjusted it up to $86 a night now, moving forward, with a $25 cleaning fee. But I don't charge for pets, I don't charge for additional guests. Pets are highly encouraged at my rental house, so that is a huge thing there. As far as the cleaning fee and having a rental cleaner, a lot of people kind of get really huffy and huffy about cleaning fees through the short-term rentals, through VRBO and Airbnb. Some people are charging really high cleaning fees, like $100, $200 plus, and then they have this list of instructions for you to clean before you check out. I don't do that. The only cleaning instructions that I have for my guests are to turn off all the lights, lock all the doors, and to have a good time. Everything else I'm going to take care of. I just ask that you lock up, turn off the lights, and enjoy yourself. So very straightforward, which is why I feel comfortable having a very small cleaning fee added in there. And the reason I chose the cleaning fee over increasing the price is just how you're looking at it in the app. You can look at it and have the entire cost broken down, or you can look at it per night, and it shows a little bit less per night, a little bit less per stay without the cleaning fee. So that's really the only reason that I did the cleaning fee versus increasing the price overnight. I don't know if that makes sense, but it makes sense to me. But because of all these guests that I had staying that were doing one night stays, I was doing daily trips back and forth from Mountain Home to Boise and then driving back after I cleaned, which is 45 miles plus one way. So that's an hour and a half of driving plus cleaning time. Our daughter got sick, and I realized that I was going to put myself in a situation where I was not going to be able to clean one of these days, and I was going to need somebody to help me. And so I reached out to my sister-in-law who lives close by, and I said, hey, would you want to do this? She said, nope, but I have a friend who would be open in this opportunity. So I talked with a friend, we connected, and we negotiated to pay $55 per cleaning, and that's just a standard cleaning. So I've had her clean twice since I started the rental property. She's been fantastic, and it's helped me out in those situations where I can't do it myself, potentially moving forward when I might need her more and more. That being said, I feel like I've learned a lot in my first 30 days of working with Airbnb and going through the app and the system and all of those things. And I would say one of the biggest things that I've learned is to manually review and approve all of your guests that stay at your rental. This goes in two ways. One, you can look and see if they have poor reviews from other hosts. If they have bad reviews, you probably don't want them staying at your property. They're probably going to be a headache or do damage or do something that just makes it a little bit harder for you to run this as a business. If they don't have any stays, it's a brand new profile, be cautious, because I've done a lot of reading on Reddit and different forums where people who stay on these Airbnbs and VRBO and they get bad reviews and they're not really good tenants, delete their whole thing, start a whole new profile, and start all over again because they can't get booked because no one wants to take the risk of them damaging or going through and being a headache. So taking a small amount of time at the beginning to go through the website and review the guests before you approve can save you a lot of time and headaches in the back end with damages and parties and liabilities and all of that stuff that you want to avoid when doing this. The second thing would be to document any damages or issues that you have and report them to Airbnb. If you have a no smoking policy and you have ashes and cigarettes and all the things, report it to Airbnb. If they damage something like a table and you have to replace it, report it to Airbnb, and Airbnb is going to replace that item and give you money back for it, usually at a full percentage of that. That's going to be worked out through Airbnb, but you have to be able to document it and report it in a timely manner and effectively show what happened with that guest. Another thing is to make your listing photos very realistic to what your house or your property actually looks like. If they come in and it looks nothing like what's shown online, they're not going to be happy. If I show that I have this huge backyard and they get there and it's actually like a third of the size, they're not going to be as happy with it as they are with it actually being big. I would recommend taking really well lit photos inside. If you don't feel comfortable doing it yourself, this would be an investment worth getting a professional photographer to come in and take photos of your property to list on Airbnb, especially if you are listing an entire house. If it's a room, you might be able to get away with it. But an entire house, you want to show it off in the most beautiful way that you can, because that is what's going to naturally attract people into your house, going, hey, look at how nice this room is. Look at how big and green the backyard is. Those are things that really are going to draw attention immediately with potential guests. One of the first things I did when I got the rental was I created a welcome binder. It's at the rental, so I can't show you. But it essentially breaks down, here's how you get on the Wi-Fi. Here's how you use these appliances. The laundry, how to start the washer, how to do the dryer, how to operate the stove. Anything like that where a guest might go, hey, I don't have this exact thing. I'm not sure how to do this. You want to break it down step by step In the Army, we called it Barney style, so that anybody could look at it and go, hey, this is how I do this. This is going to save you time, because if they don't know how to do something, like turn the heater on, they're going to go, hey, how do you turn the heater on? And then you have to take time away from whatever else you're doing to answer that question for the guest. So if you can break it down in a very simple way at the very beginning that they can reference, you're going to save yourself time at the end. Another thing is laundry. If you can afford to get a bigger washer and dryer, it's going to save you time, because laundry is the biggest time spent cleaning and flipping the rental for the next guest. That's the first thing I do when I go in. I do my initial walkthrough, and then I pull laundry and I start laundry, because it takes so long to clean and dry and replace all the bedding. So if you get a bigger washer and a bigger dryer, you can do that and have more linens in at the same time and save yourself time and energy doing that. Another side tip with that is get black washcloths. I have predominantly white washcloths in my rental, but I have black ones for makeup, and I've had guests that haven't found them and have used white to take off their makeup, and it stains them permanently. So if you have black washcloths, articulate that those are specifically for removing makeup and items that could stain those white washcloths. And then one of the biggest things that I would hit on is just checking the little things. My first clean that I did after the guest stayed for 2 weeks, it took way longer than I estimated, because they'd been there for 2 weeks and it was dirtier. And I did not have enough time to do everything, and I was rushing through, and I forgot to empty the coffee grounds out of the coffee pot. And I realized it when I was driving home, and I was like, shucks, maybe I'll be okay. The guest is only staying one night. Well, that next morning, that guest reached out and said, hey, I went to make coffee, and there were grounds in there. They were moldy, and we just couldn't use it. I was like, shucks. I apologized. I sent them $20 back. You can adjust things in Airbnb, but I sent them $20 so they could go out and get coffee, because I offer coffee at the house. The good news is with that, they gave me an outstanding 5-star review, and they gave me really good positive and other things that I can improve on the rental house feedback, which is good. Be prepared for guests leaving items behind. This, I was taken aback. I did not realize that longer guests can leave a lot behind. The first group that stayed for 2 weeks, I walked in there, the fridge and the freezer were both full. I mean, a lot of food in both the fridge and the freezer. They left an entire cooler, a little nice cooler. They left a load of laundry in the dryer, and just a lot of little things around the house. Luckily, they were staying local. I contacted them and I said, hey, do you want the food? They said no. I said, do you want the cooler and the clothes? They said yes. So they came back by, boxed everything up, took them out the cooler and the clothes, and they went on their way. But then I had to dispose of all the food that they left. And this first tenant, they left a ton of trash. Bags and bags and bags. I filled up the back of my truck with so many bags of trash, because it was just overflowing outside in the dumpster and inside the house, and it was just an exponential amount of trash. Have a plan for when you have an excessive amount of trash left by a guest. You're gonna have to throw away food, and you're gonna have to potentially reach out to them if they leave items behind. Some people, I've read online, some people tentatively wait for the guest to reach out about an item. You're gonna have to figure out your own policy on that, whether you reach out to the item directly, whether you reach out to the guest immediately, or whether you wait for them to reach out about something. But you're going to need to hold on to those items if they do want them, and figure out a policy for sending them. Are you going to make them pay? Are you going to cover the costs of that? What does that look like? That's really something that's going to be hit home. I've had 3 different guests leave items at the house. 2 of them wanted those items back, and I had to navigate that through. And that's something that you're just going to have to face repeatedly, because people leave items. So that means as soon as you walk into the rental, you need to check spaces where people can leave items. Fridge, freezer, dryer, every single drawer in the house, in the rental, should be checked in case they left a personal item, so that you can take a picture of it, document it, reach out to them, and kind of start that process if that's how you want to approach it. Now, that's kind of my 2 cents, my personal experience, more logically thought about it. Now let's kind of go to the financial side of what it was like hosting through Airbnb. I have a very poorly made spreadsheet, but bear with me while we take a look-see at it. So the first one, I'll just show you really briefly. I broke down each of the reservations that I made on Airbnb here. From the first one on the 13th of December all the way into the last one on the 9th of January. I wrote the nightly payment that I received, the service fees that Airbnb takes out, and the occupancy taxes that are remitted by Airbnb for me. So that leaves to the take-home pay that Airbnb pays me out for each one of these. So I just did a breakdown so that you can kind of look very thoroughly at what that looks like as far as different payments, adding in the cleaning fee, not having the cleaning fee, having 20% off, 10% off, all those things are taking into impact in all of these here. And then kind of the 30-day totals here. So we can see take-home pay based off of all of these stays is $1,671.89, and that is just off of Airbnb. So we'll jump over to this thing. We know we took home quite a bit from Airbnb, but we had a lot of expenses. First one, mortgage principal. I've broken this down, my mortgage payment, into 3 different things: principal, interest, and insurance, because this plays a really big impact as far as taxes, but more on that later. So mortgage principal, $441.92. Mortgage interest, $536.34. Insurance, $220.74. And that covers taxes as well. Utilities, $259.84. It was a slightly lower month, so that'll be a little bit larger. I had a cleaner come in twice during these 30 days, $110. Gas expense for me to drive back and forth to the rental, $170.94 there in just gas. And then we have cleaning and basic supplies, which was, toiletries and condiments and basic cleaning stuff for the rental itself that I'm using to clean, $241.88. And then earnings from Airbnb, $1,671.89. All these expenses, but that doesn't show the entire month because I pulled the rental off of Airbnb because I had a guest from Furnish Finder there. So we kind of gonna include that even though it's separate from Airbnb. We had to pay an annual key check membership, which covers the lease agreements and the background checks of tenants. So that's $49.99 annually. I had to pay that during these 30 days. And then I saw an income of $567.74, and that's just based off of the prorated a fraction of the total overall payment based off how many days the tenant was renting the house. So with that $567 and the mortgage principal, which is counted as income, we saw a gain of $649.89. So $649.89 in income, take-home income, in gross earnings, in earnings before taxes. The good news, before we jump into the tax side of things, is that 3 of these bookings, one for 2 weeks, was 20% less of what I would typically see as earnings from Airbnb. We adjusted the price of the Airbnb nightly rate a little bit, added in the cleaning fee, so we're going to see more income from Airbnb in the future than what we saw for these stays here. Most of the expenses that are incurred are going to be written off as non-taxable and are going to decrease the taxable income that I have to pay taxes on. The caveat to that is the big one is the mortgage principal is not a write-off. It's not tax write-offable. You can't write it off on your taxes, so you have to pay income taxes on that principal amount. More on that later. As far as generic taxes that you have to pay for running an Airbnb, there are short-term rental taxes that might come into play in your specific area. My rental house is in Boise, Idaho, so I have 3 specific taxes that Airbnb remits for me directly through their service and throws to the IRS, so I don't have to do anything with these. They do Idaho sales tax, the Idaho travel and convention tax, and the Greater Boise Auditorium District tax. And these are all specific because it is a short-term rental, having guests stay less than 30 days. If a guest stays at a rental house for longer than 30 days, these 3 taxes don't apply. And because Airbnb is already remitting and handling all this taxes and processing it to the IRS, I don't have to do anything. The only thing that I have to cover is state tax, federal tax, and the self-employment tax rate. And those I get to handle myself. just like if you were doing any other small business. Because the principal of the mortgage is considered taxable income, we have to pay taxes on the amount of money that we spend on that. Even though it's an expense, it's coming after taxes, if that makes sense. So it looks a little bit weird in the breakdown there, in my head anyways. But after taking all of that into consideration, let's look at the spreadsheet here. Because of that, I did a slight little breakdown here. So we saw a taxable income, what we took home, and the principal on the mortgage that we paid of $649.89 for the first month. With self-employment tax, that's 15.3%, so that's $99.43. If I hit 12% on federal tax, that'll be about $77.99, and then Idaho tax is 5.695%, so that's about $37 for this, meaning that I have to pay taxes on $214.43. Now, because this is before we're taking into consideration this mortgage principal payment here, we have earnings, taxes, take-home pay, $435.46, then the mortgage expense, which is more than take-home pay. So we saw a loss of $6.46 that I had to pay out of pocket to cover all the expenses and taxes and everything this year. So I made $0 in take-home pay in my first month with Airbnb. But that's really close to breaking even, and that means that I made a mortgage payment that I didn't have to pay out of my own pocket on a rental house. This house is going to increase in value long term. There's depreciation that's not being factored into this because that's a bigger thing, and I can't really easily do that on a spreadsheet for you guys right now. But essentially, I'm covering my mortgage, and I almost broke even my first month on Airbnb, which is phenomenal. That being said, I kind of wanted to forecast what it's going to look like in the future as far as income from this house, because I'm going to be putting a lot of time into it in the future. Even though I've got a tenant staying for a long period of time, I want to look at it. Average monthly expenses is going to be about $1,600 a month. That's going to be give or take. Some months will be higher if there's annual fees and all the things, but that's just what we're estimating. If I earn $2,000 a month, which is, I think, right about where I could potentially be making either way, I would be taking home about $850 before taxes, and that includes the principal on the mortgage payment, which is about $450. That would mean that I owe about $280.46 in taxes every month. So after paying the mortgage and paying taxes, I would be taking home about $120 a month in actual earnings, plus the equity that I'm gaining on the rental property value of that mortgage being paid off. And that doesn't cover all the little things that come into it, especially that depreciation, which is going to lower that taxable income as well. But that being said, $120 a month in income right now estimated, plus gaining equity in the house, and eventually when the mortgage is paid off, all of that money, that $1,200 minus taxes, so $1,000-ish a month, is going to be coming into my pocket. So it is a long-term play, and I'm happy to see that I'm going to hopefully be averaging about $120 a month in actual physical take-home earnings from running a rental business. But only time will tell, and I hope you follow along on this journey as I run this rental house and figure things out, because it's a wild ride. So I'm going to end it there. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything that you have, please feel free to leave them down below. I will do my best to answer them and get back to you and provide more information where I can and as I learn more. So until next time, bye folks.